So, in this video, I want to talk about, how did Dutch, Bill, and Javier know about John working for the government detective agency? Like how did they know? Now, the obvious answer would be, they put his name, his missions, the things that he did, and his picture in the newspaper, plus him building up this big reputation for, working for the Pinkertons, the government at that time, and plus word of mouth. An old prison term is that, the mouth is faster than that radio. Now, there are some continuity issues with that because in part one, John talk man, we had John talks about, he had that farm for 4 years, but at the end of the epilogue mission during the cut scenes with the credits, right? Agent Ross is spying on John and his family. Jack was no more than 9 years old, right? At that time. In part two at the end. And he would have been 15 years old in the 4 years when Dutch mentions, how old is Jack, right? And John hasn't seen this kid in for so long, so I believe John, they may have owned that place for like 4 years, but they ain't lived on it for 4 years. Because I believe that within those 4 years out of 3, right, they had John already took and his family already kidnapped. But it may be, a little bit longer than them 3 years. So from 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, that's 5, 13, 14, 15. That's no more than 8 years. So, if you were to take at the age of, we're going to start at the age of 9 for Jack, right? So 7 years. Even though, again, there's time issues right there. Even though there's time issues right there, right? The continuity doesn't match up. It doesn't match up. Now, I gotta figure out what year the epilogue took place in order for it to match up with those 8 years. Okay, Google, what year was it in Red Dead Redemption 2 in the epilogue mission? $1906, right? 1906 to 1911 would be 7, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. You got 7 years. That makes more sense for Jack to be his age when we see him in part 1 after John gets back to his family. Which means they ain't lived on that beach as hope in them years, because I strongly believe Agent Ross got John and his family right there when we seen him at those cutscenes into part 2. Which means they had John working for them for a total of 6 years. Not the full 7, but 6 years. which means they had them traveling from different states, doing their work to hunt down outlaws, gangs, also doing bounties, which gave him the reputation throughout those years with his mission, his name, his picture in the newspaper, and word of mouth to spread out. Which means by the time he got to Bill, Bill already knew. But John never wanted to kill any of them. Okay? Well, we see how hard they were doing to John, how horrible, how mean they were to John, because something probably has happened to where he just hesitated, which we always hear, John, like, look, man, I don't want to kill you. Let me help you, let me help you. Let me get you out of this. When he said that to, Bill, Javier, Dutch, in their minds, they're thinking, why are you doing this? Because they don't know that his family got took. They don't know that he's been captive himself and forced to do this. He said himself, look, if it was me, I wouldn't hunt them. They may not like each other, but they love and respect each other. Keep that in mind. So, I think when it came time to the first step, the first pass of hunting down the Dutch gang, I believe Ross came to John and said, look, you're not going to like this part, but you will have no other choice to do this part. This is the first step in the Dutch gang. I believe Ross gave John files on the people that were still left from the gang who left and started lives. I believe the first person had to be Mary Beth. I believe John had to hunt her down and kill her, and that was hard on him to do. I believe the next person was Tilly. Now Tilly, she's a tough one. And if you ask me, I believe Mary Beth probably committed suicide. Tilly, she ain't the type to plead, but she knows John. They all know what they've been through. I believe John did tell Tilly, like, look, I don't want to do this, but these people, they got my family, and I have no choice or else they're going to kill them and kill me, and I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. But Tilly, with her outlaw ways, I believe maybe her husband, if not her child, may have gotten killed. Which drove her to like, look, I'm not going alive, but I'm not gonna off myself, but I'm not gonna go down easy either. So I do believe Tilly gave John a fight and had to take her in dead. I believe the next person would have had to been Mr. Pearson. Mr. Pearson's the cook, but I know Mr. Pearson's willing to defend and fight. That's without a doubt. So when John went back to Rhodes, he didn't want to. Probably sparked up a conversation. But I believe Pearson probably like, man, I know why you're here. It's like, yeah. I don't believe John wanted to do it. I don't believe Pearson, wanted it to happen by any means. But I believe Pearson wasn't just going to go out. I believe he did fight John in his shop and died and took him in dead, which explains, why, Agent Ross always gets on to John, look, I need you to bring him in alive. Don't be bringing him in dead. Don't be bringing him in dead. John ain't gonna want them to suffer alive, being captured alive. No. If that was being John's shoes, man, I would have to kill them because I don't want them to suffer. Not alive, not being captured alive, because you would imagine some harsh shit being done to him if that was the case. And in that, I believe the next person John would have had a hunt was Charles up in Canada. With the governments, passing how strong they are, they would have definitely had no problem getting John into Canada because of his mission and what it was. There's a good chance that maybe word got up there to Canada, but I don't believe so. What gave John the advantage against Charles, because as far as Charles is concerned, it's a surprise visit from John. And I think around that time, John's like, look, man, Charles, he's a tough guy, so fighting him, head on or in a shootout ain't gonna be easy. So you're gonna have to trick him. You're gonna have to get him really off guard and try to overpower him. And I believe that's what John did, and I believe Charles may have went down easy because of that, but before maybe his last breath, why you do this? And John told him. And I believe Charles would accept, like, look, do what you have to do to get your family back. I'm willing to lay down my life like this in order for you to get your family back. Because if it was any other way, Charles would have killed John. But I believe if he let John give a chance to explain himself like Charles does, I think Charles would have definitely talked to John, came up with a solution of some sort to really help him. And there's a chance it may or may not have worked. I believe the next person John may have hunted was Sadie in Africa, where she relocated at. And I would imagine that would have been the tougher one, because Sadie, she's tough. She is definitely tough. Again, John, would have gave his reasons why. But Sadie, she's like, I lost my husband. I don't know if she had any kids. I lost my place. You guys took me in. I was there at the beginning when Dutch lost his mind. I was there when Arthur's death and what he'd done for us to sacrifice himself. I was there when you and Tilly, after we escaped, Abigail, Jack. I was there when we brought down Micah. I'm glad you told me. I'm glad you told me what happened to the others. I can't surrender, but I can't give up neither. You're not going to take being alive. John, I'm going to give you a fight. And I strongly believe Sadie gave John a big fight and took her in dead. I believe with those reports coming back and being printed in the newspaper within the U.S. is definitely how, Bill, Javier, and Dutch was like, oh, shit. So he hunting everybody. And I believe the last person to be hunted, to be killed, who was not a fighter at all, is ChEDDERTarY. I believe ChEDDERTarY would have given himself up. I believe ChEDDERTarY would have had understanding why John doing what he's doing. And I think because of those things is why it plays a big mental issue in part 1 with John. Because he had to do those things and he didn't want to do those things. Which explains why it was so hard for him to get, Bill, Javier, and Dutch. Because they're like, look, man, if you want to take us in, you got to work for it. You got to work for it. We're not going to make it easy. You got to work for it. You. Imagine if Arthur was still alive. I think Arthur would have been the toughest one to bring down. And I think Arthur would have definitely been the last one to get in the game of part 1. I think Arthur would already have an understanding why. Arthur would have been in a warm environment like he should have been with tuberculosis. I don't think he would be in any shape to fight because of it. Living his life happy that he can be. And I think he would actually be willing to give himself up for John because he cared and loved for him. And the reason why I said that would be the hardest to do is because it would be way too easy for it. And I think that would have screwed with John so much if that was the case. So much if that was the case. So much. Because John would have to live with that. He would have to live with that. That's why I say I believe in the end. You know, why they knew about him working for it is because they had John for them 7 years, right? And then 6 years later, in it, how they knew about John working for them because of the newspapers and word of mouth. That being said, I'm out.